Hey there everybody, it's Russ, and a little bit different video today. We are traveling and are on the road. I haven't had the chance to ride the last couple days, so I thought I would do a Q&A. I asked you guys to leave some comments in the community section, so let's get into it. First question is from Manual GX, and he asks, are there any trends or developments in the cycling industry that I'm excited about? That's a tough question because at the moment I am not excited about the general trends in the bike industry. And by that I mean gravel bikes becoming essentially road bikes, losing a lot of their utility, the loss of mechanical shifting options. And once again, with the economic downturn we're experiencing, a lot of brands like Specialized have dumped everything but racing. So gone are their ambassadors, gone is their support of groups like RAR, Radical Adventure Riders. They're shutting down Machines for Freedom. It seems like when times are good, everyone's all about inclusion and growing the market. But the second things get tough, you know, they cut all that out and are just back to the status quo. So what am I excited about? Like I mentioned in my trends video, I'm excited about this emerging ATB. Mostly because there isn't like a ATV race around it, so it hasn't been polluted by bike racing quite yet. I think gravel bikes have pretty much stagnated, and we're going to see a lot more interesting, wacky experimentation in the ATB market. So ATBs, excited about that. Question from JP Fasano. Laura no longer has a basket on her breadwinner. I'm wondering why. Is the new setup better? And I think she's out going for a birding walk in the moment. Otherwise, I'd bring her on. It's not necessarily better, I think, but it is a ton easier to travel with our bikes. We flew with our bikes to Spain and here to California, and it would just be an impossible fit with a basket. Since we're doing more travel with the bikes at the moment, it just makes more sense to go with a rackless, basketless system. Not that basket bikes are bad, they're 100% awesome, but in terms of packing the bikes in a case, it just doesn't work out so good. So John P asked a couple questions. Product release date for the Uno. Earliest would be the spring. It takes, from what I understand, about 4 months to get them made and shipped over here and be ready to sell, and that's if everything goes smoothly. So maybe the spring, midsummer. The next question is, are there any sweat issue retention with the fingerless gloves I use? And the answer is no. Again, it's a crochet knit, so if it does get wet, it does dry out really, really fast. Any thought on toe socks? Don't own any. Any more product collaborations on the horizon? Yes, we're currently in the prototype stage of making a bag with Steady Bagworks based in Oklahoma. I actually just sent him a deposit, and he's making me a custom sized bag with a couple of interesting doodads, one of which has not been on a handlebar bag before. So that should be pretty interesting if it works out. Don Mayhart asks, any updates on the Uno friction shifters? Still in the testing phase. So far, so good. You know, it's a product that we're going to be putting our name behind and helping promote, so I want to make sure it's as good as possible. After this trip, I'm going to send my feedback to the folks at Soma, and hopefully they can implement some tweaks just so it'll give you guys the best kind of customer experience. Greg R asks, would you ever be tempted to live overseas, like say Girona, if the opportunity presented itself? Yes, definitely would be tempted to live overseas, in particular Spain. Maybe not Girona, we'll see. We do have kind of mid to long-term plans to eventually move to Spain, ideally, but we'll see how things go. David Carley asks, a review of flat pedals for relatively mild riders, those more interested in pedaling than jumping, etc. My go-to pedal for, I think, everything. It used to be the EC Thump. I think EC, the brand, has gone away. Now it's the MSW Thump. So that's a great pedal, or pedals like that. Kind of the things I look for in a really good pedal are metal traction pins, just for a lot of grip. A fairly large platform, so it really supports your foot well. And probably the key feature is for it to be concave. Is that convex? Convex. I really dislike pedals with a raised spindle because I think it makes it less grippy, and over time that raised area creates a hot spot. So I always look for a convex pedal that cradles the foot. Christopher Unruh asks, Russ, how are you? You still enjoy making content? Thanks for asking. Nobody ever asked. In terms of the channel, it's okay. You know, it's not growing as fast as I'd hoped. I try not to let that beat me up, and instead of trying to grow into the largest channel, I just try to serve are, you know, it's not an insignificant audience, but it's not as large as other cycling channels out there. I try to serve you guys well and keep things interesting and fresh. I definitely go through phases where I feel like a little bit burnt out or uninspired, especially during the winter when it's, you know, cold and snowy in Montana. That's why we are here in California. But I still like making content. I still like sharing things that I'm personally interested in brands that I think are unique and doing something different. It's not to everyone's taste, but I think in order for me to continue to do this, I have to do videos on the bikes and the products and the experiences that we truly like to do, rather than just what we think is popular or what the industry is pushing. That is our North Star, if you will, just trying to integrate what we're authentically interested in with the channel. Paul asks, how capable is a hardtail for long distance cycling in mostly tarmac? And what can you add to make it a bit more usable? Aero bars, new tires, and wheels. Personally, not a fan of the hardtail if you're riding tarmac. It's kind of like, you know, driving a pickup truck on a racetrack. The terrain and the bike aren't matched, so it's just a huge compromise. I definitely swap out the tires to something with a smoother tread. I'd also lose the suspension fork for a rigid fork, and I'd probably put drops on it. So essentially I'd turn it into a gravel bike. And at that point, when you're making those changes aftermarket, you're almost better off just buying a new bike. And I'm fairly serious about, you know, losing the suspension fork because I don't think it's necessary on tarmac. It adds weight. You always have some kind of pedal-induced bob, and just not my favorite. Chuck asks, thinking of your bike ownership journey, how would you compare Salsa Cutthroat to your current favorite bikes? So you guys may or may not know this, but Laura and I used to be sponsored by Salsa, so we got a chance to ride pretty much all of their drop bar bikes except for the Fargo. The version of the Cutthroat that we owned is a little bit different from the current version. It had a slightly steeper head tube angle, and it wasn't as slack. It was still trying to be kind of a roadish front end. The current generation, I believe, has a 69-degree head tube angle, so it's going to have higher trail. Of the bikes the Cutthroat most resembles, it would probably be the Tanglefoot. Actually pretty close. I mean, both have a longish rear end, and I think the Tanglefoot might have a 69-degree head tube angle as well. Don't quote me on that, but of the bikes that it's most similar currently in the fleet, it is the Tanglefoot. Laura still has hers. We swapped hers to an alt bar setup with the Ritchie Coyote bars, and she loves it in that configuration. I actually think it's more fun as a alt bar bike rather than a drop bar bike. I ended up selling mine just because I like to run the front rack or something, and the forks, you know, they're just not engineered to have any kind of front rack on them. It's Food24 asks, I've seen all your budget mullet videos. What is the best setup among all of them? Variables can include cost, complexity of installation, shifting quality, etc. I think if you want an indexed version of the budget mullet, just go with ratio, get a SRAM shifter, and modify a SRAM Eagle rear derailleur with their cable fin that lets the mountain bike derailleur talk to the road shifter. That's probably the easiest and most readily available way to do it if you want index shifting. If you want to run it friction, then currently on the market, you know, there's the MicroShift 12-speed bar end, and hopefully by midsummer, the Uno shifter, which I think will be the ultimate friction shifter for mullet setups. Kaylee McGrew asked, could you name some front rack options to support a walled 137? For those of us with caliper brakes? Seems like the Nitto M18 is the only option and is unavailable just about everywhere. There's a couple ways to go. You could go with a rack that connects down to the eyelets near the dropouts and uses a flexible aluminum bar to go behind the caliper. I believe Soma has a mini front rack which works really well in that situation. Velo Orange also has a bunch of different options. I'd look at something like their Constructeur front rack, which is similar to the Soma one, where it connects to the bike via the eyelets at the front fork and has that flexible aluminum bar to connect to the crown of the fork. Probably my favorite rack of theirs is the flat pack rack. I don't know if it would work with a caliper brake, however. Another rack to look into is the Obento rack by Simworks. That's one that I've used to run the basket with. So there are options out there. They're a little bit nichier and more expensive, but there are options that exist. New Old Steel, who's also a YouTuber into cool old steel bikes, asks a specific group set or component that you could buy hundreds of for a just in case they completely disappear situation. And right now I'd probably stock up on Cool Stop salmon brake pads if you've got Canties or caliper brakes. I think if you bought like a dozen pair, that should be good enough for the rest of your life. I think front derailleurs are going to get a little bit more scarce to find, so I would definitely stock up on a couple of those. I think any 9-speed mountain bike stuff I would probably buy in an instant. Yeah, it's a weird time in bikes. I think we are at that crux where we're going to start to see lots of development in mechanical bike components just kind of fall off, unfortunately. So if you like mechanical analog bikes, whatever you want to call them, it doesn't hurt to stock up on a few things. I'm not saying you should hoard specifically, but buy a few. Who knows what could happen next. If you guys found this fun and entertaining, please consider joining us on Patreon. You get discounts of brands that we love, as well as a lot of behind the scenes info and updates on products that we're working on. And it also gives you all the tingly feels inside. If you guys have any other questions that you would want me to answer in a future video, leave those in the comments below. And as always, keep the supple side down.